I never thought a wasp nest would change my life. But then again, I never thought a lot of things that happened that summer would happen. My name's Jake, and I was 19 that June, home from my first year at State University, with absolutely no idea what I was supposed to do with myself. College had been this huge milestone I'd worked toward for years. But now that I'd gotten through freshman year, I felt more lost than ever. Everyone kept asking about my major, my plans, my future, as if turning 19 suddenly meant I should have all the answers. I've always been the type of person who helps out when someone needs it. Maybe it's because I'm naturally awkward in social situations, so doing something useful gives me a purpose, a reason to be there. In high school, I'd started doing yard work for the Hendersons, my best friend Marcus's family, to earn some extra money. Mrs. Henderson always paid me fairly and usually threw in a sandwich or some lemonade. It was easy work, and Marcus would sometimes hang out while I mowed or raked, turning chores into something that felt less like work. When Marcus left for a summer pre-law program at Northwestern, I figured I'd probably stop coming by the house. But Mrs. Henderson asked me to keep up with the yard work while he was gone. The grass doesn't stop growing just because Marcus isn't here, she'd said with that warm smile of hers. And honestly, I could use the help. The Henderson house had always felt welcoming to me. It's one of those suburban homes that looks like it came straight out of a magazine, not because it's fancy, but because someone clearly cares about it. The front yard is always perfectly maintained, with flower beds that actually have flowers in them. Not just mulch and good intentions like at my house. Inside, it smells like vanilla candles and whatever Elena's been cooking. And there are family photos everywhere that make you feel like you're part of something stable and loving. Elena. Henderson is the kind of woman who remembers your favorite snacks and asks about your classes and actually listens to the answers. She's been divorced for about 2 years now. Marcus had told me it was pretty amicable. It's just two people who grew apart, but she seemed to handle it with the same quiet grace she handled everything else. She works as a nurse at the county hospital, doing 12-hour shifts that would exhaust most people, but she always seemed to have energy left over for Marcus and his friends. I'd known her for years, but we'd never really spent time alone together. She was Marcus's mom, a background figure in my life who was always kind but never someone I thought about as a person separate from that role. That was about to change. It was a Saturday morning in mid-June when I pulled into the Henderson driveway. My ancient Honda Civic, making the concerning rattling sound it had been making for the past month. I grabbed my earbuds and water bottle from the passenger seat, already mentally planning out how I'd tackle the lawn. The grass was getting a bit long. I'd been putting off this visit for a week because honestly, coming to Marcus's house without Marcus felt weird. But as I rounded the corner into the backyard, I found Elena standing in the middle of the lawn, hands on her hips, staring up at something under the eaves of the house. She was wearing old jeans and a faded blue t-shirt, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she looked frustrated in a way I'd never seen before. "Oh, Jake," she said when she noticed me, relief flooding her voice. Perfect timing. I've been standing here for 20 minutes trying to work up the courage to deal with that thing. I followed her gaze and immediately saw the problem. Tucked up under the overhang near the back porch was a wasp nest about the size of a basketball, gray and papery, and absolutely crawling with activity. Even from 30 feet away, I could see the wasps coming and going, and my stomach clenched. With the familiar anxiety I'd felt around stinging insects since I was a kid, "That's a big one," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Elena laughed, but it was a stressed laugh. "I've been putting this off for weeks. Every time I come out here, I tell myself I'm going to take care of it, and then I see all those wasps and I just ... chicken out. I even bought the spray." She gestured toward the back porch, where I could see a can of wasp and hornet killer sitting on the steps. But I keep imagining them all swarming down and attacking me. Could understand that fear completely. When I was 12, I'd stepped on a ground wasp nest while helping my dad with yard work, and the memory of being stung 6 times while trying to run away still made me shudder. But looking at Elena's in the genuine frustration and embarrassment, in her expression, I felt that familiar urge to help kick in. I could take care of it for you, I heard myself saying, if you wanted. Her face lit up in a way that made something warm spread through my chest. It wasn't just gratitude. It was the way she looked at me, like I was someone who could solve problems. Someone reliable. Not Marcus's awkward friend, but just ... Jake. Would you really? I mean, I don't want you to get hurt, but I would be so grateful. I've been losing sleep thinking about those things, building a colony right above my back door. It's no problem, I said, walking over to examine the spray can. I've done this before. That was only partially true. I'd helped my dad with a smaller nest a few years ago, but I figured the principle was the same. The key is to spray it in the evening when they're less active. But since it's still morning, we'll just have to be extra careful. Alina nodded, suddenly looking more animated than I'd seen her in a while. What do you need me to do? We spent a few minutes planning our approach. I'd take the ladder from the garage and position it so I could reach the nest while Alina would stand nearby to spot me and hand me the spray when I was ready. It seemed straightforward enough, but as we set everything up, I became increasingly aware of how nervous I was. And not just about the wasps. There was something different about being here alone with Alina, working together on something that it had nothing to do with Marcus or lawn care or any of the usual reasons I had for being at their house. When she helped me position the ladder, her hand brushed against mine as we both reached for the same rung, and I felt an unexpected jolt of awareness. When she looked up at me to make sure I was ready, I noticed details I'd somehow missed in. All the years I'd known Hathaway, her eyes crinkled slightly when she was concentrating. The small scar on her chin that I'd never seen before, how she bit her lower lip when she was worried. Okay, I said, trying to focus on the task at hand. I'm going to climb up slowly and then you hand me the spray. The instructions say to aim for the opening and spray steadily for about 10 seconds. Be careful, Alina said, and there was something in her voice that made me look down at her again. She was watching me with genuine concern. Not the polite worry you'd show for any neighbor kid, but something more personal. I positioned myself on the ladder and reached down for the spray can. Alina stepped closer to hand it to me, and for a moment we were face to face, her looking up and me looking down. Close enough that I could smell her shampoo something light and floral that I'd never noticed before. Ready? She asked quietly. Ready, I said, though my heart was beating fast for reasons that had nothing to do with the wasps. The actual spraying went better than I'd expected. The wasps seemed sluggish in the morning air, and the spray reached the nest easily. I emptied about half the can, watching as the activity around the opening slowed and then stopped completely. Within a few minutes, it was clear that we'd been successful. That's it? Alina asked as I climbed down. That seemed almost too easy. Sometimes it is that easy, I said, feeling ridiculously proud of myself. We'll need to wait a few hours to make sure they're all dead, and then I can knock the nest down with a long stick or something. Alina was grinning now, the stress and frustration from earlier completely gone. Jake, you're amazing. I can't believe I was so worked up about that. You made it look like nothing, the way she said my name, the genuine admiration in her voice. Hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. I felt myself blushing and hoped she'd attribute it to the exertion of climbing the ladder. It really wasn't a big deal, I said, but I was smiling too. There was something intoxicating about being the person who'd solved her problem, who'd stepped up when she needed help. We stood there for a moment, both of us looking up at the now quiet. Ness and I felt a weird sense of accomplishment that went beyond just killing some wasps. We'd worked together, Alina and I, as a team, and it had felt ... natural, easy, like we'd been doing it for years. I owe you big time, Alina said, and then, almost without seeming to think about it, she added, stay for dinner with me, please. It's the least I can do. I opened my mouth to say that wasn't necessary, that I should probably get home, that my mom was expecting me all, the polite deflections that would have been the normal response. But something in Alina's voice stopped me. It wasn't just politeness or gratitude. There was a note of something else, something that almost sounded like loneliness. I mean, if you don't have other plans, she added quickly, as if she'd realized how forward the invitation might have sounded. I just ... it would be nice to have some company for dinner. I've been eating alone a lot lately. That admission hit me harder than it should have. Lena eating dinner alone in this big warm house, night after night. It seemed wrong somehow, like a waste of all that kindness and warmth she carried around. Like that, I said, and I meant it more than I'd expected. Her face lit up again, and I felt that same warm feeling in my chest. Great, but you're covered in wasp spray and probably grass stains. Why don't you shower and change? You can borrow something of Marcus's. You two are about the same size. The offer felt surprisingly intimate, wearing Marcus's clothes in his house while he was hundreds of miles away, but Alina was already heading toward the back door, talking about what she might cook, and I found myself following her. I make a decent chicken parmesan, she was saying, or if you're not in the mood for anything heavy, I could do something lighter. What sounds good to you? As we walked into the kitchen, I realized this was the first time Alina had ever asked me what I wanted for dinner, the first time she was cooking specifically for me, rather than just offering me whatever leftovers were available. It felt significant in a way I couldn't quite articulate. Anything you make will be great, I said. You're an amazing cook. She turned to face me, and for just a moment I saw something shift in her expression. It was subtle, just a slight change in the way she was looking at me, but it made my breath catch. You know what? She said, seeming to make a decision. Let's make this a proper dinner. Something special. You did me a huge favor today, and I want to do this right. As she started pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. Talking about her plans for the meal, I headed upstairs to shower and change. But even as I washed off the wasp spray and grass stains, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had fundamentally shifted between Alina and me in the space of that one morning. I was no longer just Marcus's friend who did yard work. I was Jake, the person who'd helped her when she needed it, who she wanted to cook a special dinner for. And as I pulled on one of Marcus's t-shirts, a soft, worn baseball shirt that smelled faintly of the Henderson house's familiar vanilla and laundry detergent, I found myself looking forward to dinner in a way that felt entirely new. When I came back downstairs, Alina was in full cooking mode, ingredients laid out on the counter, a bottle of wine already breathing on the kitchen island. She'd changed to trading her work clothes for a sundress that made her look younger, more relaxed. Perfect timing, she said, glancing up from where she was seasoning chicken breasts. Want to help? I could use someone to chop vegetables. And just like that, we fell into an easy rhythm. Alina would hand me ingredients to prep while she handled the more complex parts of the cooking, and we talked while we worked. But the conversation was different than it had ever been before. Instead of the usual pleasantries about school and Marcus and how my parents were doing, we talked about real things. Alina asked me about college, not just how my grades were, but what I thought about living away from home. Whether I was enjoying the independence, what I missed about being in high school. I found myself telling her things I hadn't really talked about with anyone, like how sometimes I felt like I was just going through the motions of being a college student without any real sense of purpose. I think that's more normal than you realize, she said, rolling out pasta dough with practiced efficiency. When I was your age, I thought everyone else had it all figured out, and I was the only one who felt lost. Looking back, I think most of us were just pretending to know what we were doing. Did you always want to be a nurse? I asked, genuinely curious. I'd never thought to ask Alina about her career before, never really considered that she'd had dreams and ambitions beyond being Marcus's mom. She smiled, but it was a thoughtful smile. Actually, no, I wanted to be a teacher when I was in college. Elementary school. I loved the idea of helping kids learn and grow, but life had other plans. What changed your mind? Marriage, mostly. My ex-husband's Marcus's dad, he got a job offer right after we graduated that required us to move to a small town where there weren't many teaching positions available. The hospital was hiring nurses, though, and they had a program where they'd help pay for additional training. She shrugged, but I could hear something wistful in her voice. It worked out fine. I like nursing. It's rewarding work. But sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd stuck with my original plan. I watched her as she talked, noticing the way her hands moved confidently as she cooked, the slight melancholy that had crept into her expression. This was Alina the person, not Alina the mom, and I was fascinated by the difference. You could still teach, I found myself saying. I mean, if you wanted to. People change careers all the time. She looked at me with surprise, as if the possibility had never occurred to her. You know what? You're absolutely right. I'm only 42. That's not too old to start over, is it? Definitely not, I said, and I meant it. There was something energizing about seeing Alina consider new possibilities, about being the person who'd suggested them. We continued cooking and talking. I became increasingly aware of the small intimacies of working together in the kitchen. The way Alina would brush past me to reach something in a cabinet, the comfortable silences that fell between us, the way she'd taste something and then offer me the spoon to try it too. Everything felt natural and easy, like we'd been doing this for years, but more than that, I was seeing Alina in a completely different light. The way she moved around her kitchen with such confidence, the way she talked about her work and her dreams, the way she really listened when I talked, it was like discovering that someone I'd known for years was actually a completely different person underneath. She wasn't just Marcus's mom anymore. She was a Alina woman with her own thoughts and feelings and disappointments and hopes. A woman who made incredible food and asked thoughtful questions and had somehow made me feel more interesting and capable than I'd felt in months. And as we worked together, preparing what was shaping up to be the best meal I'd had in a long time, I couldn't shake the feeling that this dinner was going to be different from any meal I had ever shared with the Henderson family before. The chicken parmesan was incredibly crispy and perfectly seasoned, with homemade pasta that was better than anything I'd ever had at a restaurant. But what made the meal special wasn't just the food, it was the conversation. Alina had opened a bottle of wine and poured herself a glass, then hesitated before offering me one too. You're in college now, she said with a slight smile. I suppose one glass won't hurt. It was such a small gesture, but it felt significant. She was treating me like an adult, like someone worth having a real conversation with over dinner. And that's exactly what happened. So tell me honestly, Alina said as we settled into eating, how are you really doing with college? Not the version you tell your parents, but the truth. I took a sip of wine which was smoother and more complex than the cheap beer I was used to, and considered her question. There was something about the way she asked it, genuinely curious and non-judgmental, that made me want to be honest. I feel like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not, I admitted. Everyone else seems to know exactly what they want to major in, what career they're working toward, what their 5-year plan looks like. And I'm just ... there, going through the motions. Alina nodded thoughtfully. What did you think college would be like? I thought I'd figure myself out, you know? Like being away from home would suddenly make me this confident, decisive person who had everything together. Instead, I feel more confused than ever. The pressure to have it all figured out at 19 is ridiculous, Alina said, setting down her fork and looking at me seriously. I'm 42, and I'm still figuring things out, especially lately. What do you mean? She was quiet for a moment, twirling pasta around her fork but not eating it. Being divorced at my age. It's not what I expected my life to look like. When I got married, I thought that was it, you know? I'd found my person. We'd raise our kids, grow old together. And that didn't work out. It left me wondering who I am when I'm not someone's wife. I'd never heard Alina talk about her divorce before. Marcus had mentioned it was amicable, but he'd never gone into details, and I'd never thought to ask. Now, seeing the vulnerability in her expression, I realized how much she must have been dealing with that none of us really understood. How? Do you figure that out? I asked. I'm still working on it, she said with a rueful laugh. It's weird, starting over at 42. Most of my friends are still married, and when we get together, they talk about their husbands and their couple. Friends and their vacation plans. I feel like a third wheel half the time. It's like I don't quite fit into my old life anymore, but I haven't figured out what my new life looks like yet. That sounds lonely, I said quietly. Alina looked up at me, and there was something in her expression that made my chest tighten. It is lonely, more than I expected it to be. I thought I'd appreciate the independence, the chance to make my own decisions without having to consider someone else. And I do sometimes. But the quiet ... the coming home to an empty house. Harder than I thought it would be. We sat in silence for a moment, and I felt the weight of what she'd shared with me. Alina, who always seemed so put together and content, was struggling with the same kind of uncertainty that I was. It made me see her in an entirely new light. I get that, I said finally. Not the divorce thing, obviously, but the feeling like you don't fit anywhere. Like everyone else got a manual for how to be an adult and you missed the distribution. Alina smiled, and it was the first genuine smile I'd seen from her all evening. That's exactly what it feels like. Out like everyone else is in on some secret that no one bothered to tell me. Maybe the secret is that there is no secret, I suggested. Maybe everyone's just making it up as they go along, you know what? You might be right. She raised her wine glass in a mock toast. Here's to making it up as we go along. I clinked my glass against hers, and we both laughed. But there was something deeper happening beneath the laughter. A recognition of shared experience that felt important. Can I ask you something? Alina said after we'd both taken another sip of wine. Sure. What do you want? Not what your parents want for you, or what you think you should want, but what you actually want. It was such a simple question, but it hit me like a punch to the gut, because the truth was, I had no idea. I'd spent so much time trying to meet other people's expectations that I'd never really considered what my own expectations might be. I don't know, I admitted. Is that pathetic? Not at all. I think it's honest. And I think more people should. Admit when they don't know something instead of pretending they do. We talked for what felt like hours, the conversation flowing from topic to topic in a way that felt effortless. Lena told me about her work at the hospital, the satisfaction she got from helping patients, but also the emotional toll it took. I told her about my classes, the professors I liked, and the ones I didn't. It's the weird social dynamics of dorm life. But more than that, we talked about deeper things. Alina shared stories about her childhood, her relationship with her parents, the dreams she'd had when she was younger. I found myself opening up about my own fears and insecurities in ways I'd never done with anyone before. I worry that I'm not interesting enough, I confessed at one point. Like all my friends from high school seem to have these amazing college experiences and I'm just ordinary, Alina said, leaning forward slightly. You are anything but ordinary.
Oh.
You're thoughtful and kind and genuinely curious about the world. Do you know how rare that is? The way she said it, the sincerity in her voice, made me feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Valued. Not for what I might accomplish or who I might become, but for who I was right now. You really think so? I know so. You spent your morning helping me with something I was too scared to handle myself. And now you're sitting here having a real conversation with me instead of just making polite small talk. When was the last time someone asked me what I wanted the way you just asked me? When was the last time someone really listened to my answer? I realized that somewhere during dinner, the sun had set. The kitchen was now lit by the warm glow of the overhead lights, creating an intimate atmosphere that made the conversation feel even more personal. I like talking to you, I said, and immediately felt like I'd said something too revealing, but Alina just smiled. Like talking to you. Too, more than I expected to, honestly. When we finally finished eating, Alina suggested we move to the living room. She brought the wine bottle with us, topping off both our glasses as we settled onto the couch. The living room was dimly lit by table lamps, creating pockets of warm light that made everything feel cozy and intimate. Right here, Alina said. Getting up and walking over to a bookshelf, she returned with a photo album, settling back onto the couch, closer to me than she'd been sitting at dinner. I was thinking about what we talked about earlier, about figuring out who you are, she said, opening the album. These are pictures from before I got married. I was looking through them the other day, trying to remember who I used to be. The photos were a revelation. Lena in college, laughing with friends, looking young and carefree in a way I'd never seen her. Lena in her early 20s, wearing vintage band t-shirts and combat boots, her hair shorter and wilder. Lena on what looked like a road trip, standing in front of national landmarks with her arms spread wide. You look so different, I said, not meaning it as criticism, but as genuine observation. I was different. Or maybe I just got buried under all the roles I was supposed to play. Wife, mother, responsible adult. She pointed to a picture of herself at what looked like a music festival, covered in mud but grinning widely. I went to Woodstock 99. Can you believe that? I was in a mosh pit. No way, I said, laughing you. Me. I had bruises for weeks and didn't care at all. I felt so alive. She looked at the photo wistfully. I haven't felt that way in a long time. As she turned the pages, telling me stories about each photo, I became acutely aware of how close we were sitting. Her shoulder was almost touching mine, and every time she reached across to point at something in the album, I caught that same floral scent of her shampoo that I'd noticed earlier. This one, she said, stopping at a photo of herself sitting on a beach at sunset, was taken right before I met Marcus's dad. I was 24, working my first nursing job, living in this tiny apartment by myself. I felt so independent, so full of possibilities. Still are, I said without thinking. Full of possibilities, I mean. Alina looked at me, and suddenly the space between us felt charged with something I couldn't name. We were close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. Close enough that when she spoke, I could feel her breath. You really think so? She asked quietly. I know so. We looked at each other for a long moment, and I felt like we were on the edge of something important. The wine had made me bold, and the intimacy of the evening had stripped away some of the usual barriers. Between us, Alina, I started. Not sure what I was going to say, but knowing I needed to say something. She reached out and touched my arm gently, her hand warm against my skin. Thank you, Jake, for listening, for seeing me as just me. It's been a long time since someone did that. You're not just Marcus's mom, I said, the words coming out more intense than I'd intended. You're this incredible person with all these layers and experiences and dreams. You're funny and smart and kind, and anyone who doesn't see that is an idiot. Elena's eyes widened slightly, and I realized I'd crossed some sort of line. But instead of pulling away, she kept her hand on my arm, her thumb absently stroking my skin in a way that made my heart race. Jake, ... she said softly, and there was something in her voice that made me lean closer. For a moment, I thought she was going to say something that would change everything between us. The air felt electric, charged with possibility and tension. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, could see the pulse fluttering at the base of Elena's throat. But then she seemed to catch herself, blinking as if coming out of a trance. She removed her hand from my arm and sat back slightly, creating distance between us that felt both necessary and disappointing. It's getting late, she said, though her voice was still soft. You should probably get home before your parents start worrying. The moment was broken, but not destroyed. There was still something hanging in the air between us, an acknowledgement of whatever had almost happened. Yeah, I said, though I had no desire to leave. I should go. We both stood up, and Alina walked me to the front door. The hallway felt too narrow, forcing us to walk close together, and I was hyper-aware of every accidentally brush of our arms. At the door, Alina turned to face me, and we stood there for a moment, neither of us quite ready to end the evening. Thank you, she said finally. For the wasp nest, obviously, but more than that. For dinner, for the conversation, she paused, seeming to search for the right words for everything. I really needed this. Me too, I said, and I meant it more than I'd ever meant anything. She smiled, and for just a second, I thought she might hug me goodbye. Instead, she reached out and squeezed my hand briefly, her fingers warm and soft against mine. Drive safe, she said. I will. I walked to my car in a daze, my mind replaying every moment of the evening. As I drove home through the quiet suburban streets, I found myself analyzing every word Alina had said, every look she'd given me, every moment when the conversation had taken on a deeper meaning. This wasn't just attraction, I realized. I mean, Alina was beautiful, I'd always known that in an abstract way, but this went beyond physical attraction. I'd genuinely connected with her in a way I rarely connected with anyone. She'd seen something in me that I wasn't sure was really there, and I'd seen sides of her that I was pretty sure nobody else got to see. The rational part of my brain was already trying to explain away what had happened. We'd both had wine. We were both feeling lonely and uncertain about our lives. It was natural that we'd bond over shared experiences. It didn't mean anything, but even as I tried to rationalize it, I couldn't deny that something real had happened. Between us? The way she'd looked at me when I told her she was incredible, the way her hand had felt on my arm, the moment when we'd both leaned closer, and I'd thought, ... what had I thought? That she was going to kiss me? That I was going to kiss her? The idea should have seemed ridiculous. Alina was Marcus's mom, a woman in her 40s, someone I'd known for years, without ever thinking of her in any romantic way. But sitting in her living room, with the wine and the dim lighting and the intimate conversation, she hadn't felt like Marcus's mom. She'd felt like Elena, a woman who was funny and vulnerable and incredibly attractive. It made me feel more interesting and worthwhile than I'd felt in months. By the time I pulled into my own driveway, I had made a decision that I knew was probably a mistake. Despite everything my rational mind was telling me about why this was a bad idea, I found myself hoping for another opportunity to see Elena alone. Because whatever had happened between us, whatever that moment on the couch had been, I wasn't ready for it to be over. I was in trouble, and I knew it. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I wanted to be. 2 weeks passed before I found an excuse to go back to the Henderson house. 2 weeks of replaying every moment of that dinner, every word Elena had said, every look we'd shared. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I was reading too much into what had been nothing more than a nice evening between friends. But I couldn't stop thinking about the way she'd touched my arm, the moment when we'd almost... What? I wasn't even sure what had almost happened, but I knew I needed to find out. The excuse I came up with was, then I told Elena I wanted to check on the wasp nest area, make sure there weren't any signs of new activity. It was plausible enough, and when I texted her about it, she responded almost immediately. That would be great. I've been meaning to have someone take a look. Are you free Saturday morning? Saturday morning couldn't come fast enough. When I arrived at the Henderson house, Elena was waiting for me in the backyard, wearing paint-splattered overalls and an old t-shirt. She looked younger somehow, more relaxed, and when she saw me, her face lit up with genuine pleasure. Jake. Perfect timing. I was just taking a break from a project. She gestured toward the open back door. Want some iced tea? It's already getting hot out here, sure, I said, following her inside. The kitchen smelled like fresh paint, and I could see paint supplies scattered on the counter. I've been on a redecorating kick since our dinner, Elena said, pouring 2 glasses of iced tea. I guess our conversation about figuring out who I am got me thinking about my space too. I started with the guest bathroom, and now I'm working on my bedroom. That's great, I said, though the mention of her bedroom made something flutter in my stomach. What color are you going with? A soft sage green. It's supposed to be calming. She handed me the glass, and when our fingers brushed, I felt that same electric awareness from 2 weeks ago. But I'm having trouble with the high corners and around the ceiling. I probably should have hired someone, but I thought I could handle it myself. I could help, I said, the words out of my mouth before I'd fully thought them through. If you want. Elena paused with her glass halfway to her lips, and I saw something flicker across her expression. Surprise, gratitude, and something else. I couldn't quite identify. You've already done so much, she said. I can't keep taking advantage of your kindness. You're not taking advantage of anything. I want to help. We looked at each other for a long moment, and I could feel the same tension from our dinner hanging in the air between us. There was more happening here than just an offer to help paint, and we both knew it. Okay, Elena said finally. But only if you let me pay you for your time. Absolutely not. Jake, Elena, I want to help because I want to help. Not because you're paying me. She smiled then, soft and genuine. All right, but I'm making you lunch, and I'm not taking no for an answer. Elena's bedroom was on the 2nd floor, at the end of the hallway. I'd never been in it before, had never had any reason to be on. Stepping inside felt like crossing into unexplored territory. It was a beautiful room, with large windows that let in plenty of natural light and furniture that looked elegant but comfortable. The walls were half-painted, the sage green Elena had chosen, creating a calm, sophisticated atmosphere. I love the color, I said, setting down the paint supplies Elena had handed me. Thanks. I was worried it might be too bold, but I'm really happy with how it's turning out. Elena was setting up the ladder near one of the high corners, her movements efficient and practiced. I've been doing a lot of things lately that feel too bold for the old me. Maybe the old you just needed permission to be bold. Elena looked at me over her shoulder, and there was something in her expression that made my heart speed up. Maybe she did. We worked together easily, Elena cutting in around the trim while I handled the higher sections she couldn't reach. Work gave us something to focus on besides the awareness that seemed to crackle between us every time we got too close. But it also created its own kind of intimacy. We were in Elena's most private space, working together to transform it into something new. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said after we'd been working for about an hour. Of course. That night at dinner, when we were talking about feeling lost and trying to figure ourselves out, did that conversation mean as much to you as it did to me? I paused in my painting, considering how to answer. "Yeah," I said finally. "It did. I haven't talked to anyone like that in maybe ever." "I keep thinking about it," Elena admitted, "about the things we talked about, the way you listened to me. It made me realize how long it's been since someone really saw me. Not as Marcus's mom, or as a nurse, or as someone's ex-wife, but just as me." "You deserve to be seen," I said, climbing down from the ladder to refill my paint roller. "You're worth seeing." Elena set down her brush and turned to face me fully. "Jake, can I tell you something? Anything? That dinner we had? It was the first time in years that I felt truly appreciated, truly valued for who I am as a person. And I know that probably sounds pathetic, but it doesn't sound pathetic at all," I interrupted. "It sounds honest. I've been thinking about that feeling about how good it felt to be really listened to, really seen, and I've been thinking about you." The words hung in the air between us, loaded with meaning that neither of us could pretend to misunderstand. Elena was looking at me with an expression that was vulnerable and nervous and hopeful all at once. "I've been thinking about you too," I said quietly. "This is complicated," Elena said, but she didn't look away. "I know. You're 19. I'm 42. No, you're Marcus's best friend. I know. People would judge us. They'd think terrible things about both of us." "I know," I said again, stepping closer to her. "But Elena, I can't stop thinking about that night. Not the way we talked, the way we connected. About the way you looked at me." Elena's breath caught slightly. "How did I look at you? Like you saw something in me that no one else has ever seen. Like I mattered." "You do matter," she said softly. "More than you know." We were standing close now, close enough that I could see the flecks of paint on her cheek. Close enough that I could smell her familiar floral scent mixed with the smell of fresh paint. "Elena," I said, my voice coming out rougher than I'd intended, "I know this is crazy, but I have feelings for you. Real feelings. And I hope, that maybe you have feelings for me too." For a moment, Elena didn't say anything, and I thought I'd made a terrible mistake. But then she reached up and touched my face gently, her thumb brushing across my cheek. "I do," she whispered. "I have feelings for you, and it scares me to death." "Why does it scare you?" "Because I'm supposed to be the adult here. I'm supposed to know better. I'm supposed to be responsible and rational and think about all the reasons why this is a bad idea." She paused, her hand still on my face. "But when I'm with you, I don't feel like any of those things. Just feel like myself." "Is that so bad?" "I don't know," she said honestly. "I really don't know." "Elena," I said, covering her hand with mine, "I can't promise this isn't complicated. I can't promise it won't be difficult. But I can promise that what I feel for you is real." "What do you feel for me?" she asked, and there was something almost desperate in her voice, like she needed to hear me say it. "I feel like you see me for who I really am, not who everyone expects me to be. I feel like I can tell you anything and you'll understand. I feel like when I'm with you, I'm the best version of myself." I paused, searching for the right words. "I feel like I'm falling in love with you." Elena's eyes widened, and for a moment I thought I'd gone too far, said too much. But then she was kissing me, soft and tentative at first, then with growing confidence as I kissed her back. It was nothing like the kisses I'd shared with girls my own age, hurried and uncertain, and focused more on the physical act than on any real connection. This was different. This was Elena pouring years of loneliness and longing into a single moment, me responding with everything I felt for her. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard, and Elena's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "We shouldn't have done that," she said, but she didn't sound like she regretted it. "Probably not," I agreed. "Do you regret it?" Elena looked at me for a long moment, her hand still resting on my cheek. "No," she said finally, "I don't regret. It But Jake, we need to be careful. This has to stay between us. If anyone found out, I know, I said. I understand. Do you? Do you really understand what this means? What we'd be risking? I thought about Marcus, about what he'd think if he knew. I thought about my parents, about Elena's reputation, about all the ways this could go wrong. Looked at her and saw someone who'd been lonely for so long. Someone who deserved to be loved and appreciated and seen for who she truly was. I understand that it's complicated, I said. I understand that it's risky. But Elena, I also understand that what we have is real, and I don't want to pretend it isn't. Neither do I, she said softly. God help me, but I don't want to pretend anymore. We finished painting in relative silence, both of us processing what had just happened between us. But it wasn't an uncomfortable silence, it was the silence of two people who had finally acknowledged something that had been building between them for weeks. When we were done, Lena stepped back to admire our work. The room looked beautiful, transformed by the soft green color and the care we'd put into the work. It looks perfect, she said, and then turning to me with a small smile, thank you for helping me with this and for ... everything else. You for letting me, I said. We were both covered in paint. Elena with a streak of green across her forehead, and me with paint on my hands and arms. We looked at each other and started laughing at the same time. We're a mess, Elena said. A beautiful mess, I replied, and Elena's laughter softened into something warmer. Jake, she said, stepping closer to me again. Are you sure about this? It's about us? Because once we cross this line, there's no going back. I'm sure, I said without hesitation. Are you? Elena looked around her newly painted bedroom, then back at me. I'm terrified, she said, but yes. I'm sure. And then she was kissing me again, and this time there was no hesitation, no holding back. This time, we both knew exactly what we were choosing, and despite all the complications and risks, we were choosing each other. When we finally broke apart, Lena rested her forehead against mine, both of us still breathing hard. This changes everything, she whispered. I know, I said. But Elena, yeah. I can't bring myself to regret it, Lena smiled. The first truly carefree smile I'd seen from her since that night at dinner. Neither can I. Over the next few months, I became an expert at finding reasons to visit the Henderson house when Marcus wasn't there. Sometimes Elena would text me about a leaky faucet or a stuck window problems that, more often than not, turned out to be less urgent than they'd initially seemed. Other times, I'd simply show up with coffee from the place downtown that Elena mentioned she liked, claiming I'd been in the neighborhood. We developed a routine that felt both natural and carefully orchestrated. I'd arrive in the late morning, after Elena had finished her household tasks, but before she had to leave for her afternoon shifts at the hospital. We'd work on whatever project Elena had mentioned, organizing the garage, trimming hedges, touching up paint in various rooms. But the work was really just an excuse to spend time together. The physical aspect of our relationship developed slowly. Carefully, we'd hold hands while sitting on the back porch with our coffee. Or Elena would rest her head on my shoulder while we watched old movies on lazy Sunday afternoons. Our kisses were gentle and infrequent, always accompanied by the unspoken. Understanding that we were walking a very thin line, but it was the emotional intimacy that really defined what we had. Elena became my confidant in a way no one else ever had been. I told her about my growing certainty that I wanted to change my major from business to social work, a decision I hadn't even shared with my parents yet. She told me about her increasing interest in going back to school herself, maybe pursuing that teaching degree she'd abandoned years ago. You should do it, I said one afternoon, as we sat in her newly painted bedroom, ostensibly taking a break from organizing her closet. You'd be an amazing teacher. I keep thinking I'm too old to start over, Elena said, her fingers intertwined. With mine, 42 isn't too old for anything, I replied. Besides, you're not starting over. You're just ... redirecting. Elena laughed. That genuine, carefree sound that I'd learned to treasure. When did you become so wise? I learned it from someone I know, I said, bringing her hand to my lips and kissing her knuckles gently. What struck me most during those months was how Lina seemed to bloom. The woman who had been staring up at that wasp nest in frustration had been replaced by someone more confident, more alive. She started wearing brighter colors, tried new recipes, even signed up for a weekend photography class that she'd been talking about for years. "You're different," I told her one day in late August as we worked together. In her garden? Different how? Happier? More? Yourself, I guess. Elena paused in her weeding and looked at me thoughtfully. "I feel different. I feel like I remember who I used to be before I got so caught up in being what everyone else needed me to be." "I like who you are," I said simply. "I like who I am when I'm with you," she replied, and the sincerity in her voice made my chest tight with emotion, but our secret relationship wasn't without its complications. There were moments that came too close to exposure, times when my heart would stop as I heard Marcus's car in the driveway. Earlier than expected, the worst incident happened in July. I'd been helping Alina install new shelving in her laundry room, and we'd lost track of time. I heard the front door slam and Marcus calling out, "Mom, I'm home." Just as Alina and I were standing close together, her hand on my arm as she examined my work, we sprang apart like teenagers caught by parents, and I busied myself with gathering tools while Alina called back in the laundry room, "Honey." Marcus appeared in the doorway, sweaty from basketball practice, and completely oblivious to the tension in the room. "Day, Jake, I didn't see your car outside. I parked on the street," I said, grateful that it was actually true I'd had to. "Parked there because Elena's neighbor had been having work done. Your mom needed help with some shelves." "Cool. They look good." Marcus grabbed a sports drink from the garage refrigerator. "Want to hang out? I was thinking we could play some video games." I glanced at Alina, who was studiously avoiding contact while organizing laundry supplies. "Sure," I said. "Let me just finish cleaning up here." As Marcus headed upstairs to shower, Alina and I stood in the laundry room, both of us shaken by how close we'd come to being discovered. "That was too close," Alina whispered. "Way too close," I agreed. "Jake, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me, okay? Do you ever feel guilty about this? About lying to Marcus?" The question hit me harder than I'd expected because the truth was, I felt guilty all the time. Marcus was my best friend, and I was keeping a huge secret from him. More than that, I was involved with his mother in a way that I knew he'd never understand or forgive. "Yes," I said quietly. "Every day." "But not guilty enough to stop," Alina said, and it wasn't really a question. "No," I admitted. "Not guilty enough to stop. Does that make me a terrible person?" Alina reached out and touched my face gently. "If it does, then we're both terrible people." The guilt was a constant weight, but it wasn't enough to make either of us end what we had. What we'd found together was too important, too rare, but it made every moment we spent together bittersweet, colored by the knowledge that we were living on borrowed time. Alina had her own concerns that went beyond the immediate risk of discovery. Late one night in August, as we sat on her back porch sharing a bottle of wine, she voiced some of the fears that had been eating at her. "I worry about what this is doing to your future," she said quietly. "Should be dating people your own age. Figuring out what you want in a relationship with someone who's in the same stage of life as you. What if what I want is this?" I asked, "What if what I want is you, Jake? You're 19. You don't know what you want yet." "Don't do that," I said, more sharply than I'd intended. "Don't dismiss what I feel because of my age. What we have is real, Alina. It's more real than anything I've ever experienced." Alina was quiet for a long moment. "I know it's real," she said finally. "That's what scares me. Because I'm 42, and I do know what I want, and what I want is you too. But I also know that wanting something doesn't make it right or sustainable." These conversations became more frequent as summer wore on, both of us grappling with the reality that what we had couldn't continue indefinitely in its current form. But neither of us was ready to end it, so we continued existing in this strange liminal space, stealing moments when we could, and trying not to think too hard about what the future might hold. Everything became more complicated when Marcus returned from his summer program in late August. Suddenly, my visits to the Henderson house had to be legitimate again. I had to navigate the minefield of being around both Alina and Marcus at the same time. Marcus was excited to be home and eager to spend time with me. It meant that opportunities for Alina and I to be alone became rare and precious. When we were all together, Alina and I had to be careful about how we looked at each other. We spoke to each other, how we moved through the space. The hardest part was watching Alina shift back into Marcus's mom mode when he was around. The confident, vibrant woman I'd gotten to know over the summer would retreat, placed by the more reserved maternal figure I'd known for years. It was like watching someone put on a costume, and it made me realize how much Alina had been hiding. Her true self for so long, Marcus, for his part, was completely oblivious to any undercurrents. If anything, he seemed pleased that his mom appeared to be in such good spirits. "I don't know what's gotten into her," he said to me one afternoon, as we sat in his room, playing video games while Alina made dinner downstairs. "She's been so happy. Lately, she even signed up for some photography class, which is totally random. But hey, I'm not complaining. It's nice to see her enjoying life again." I made some non-committal response, but inside I was churning with guilt and frustration. Marcus was genuinely happy that his mother seemed more fulfilled. He had no idea that his best friend was the reason why. The strain of maintaining the deception was wearing on me. I found myself analyzing every interaction, every casual comment, wondering if I was giving anything away. When Alina would ask if I wanted to stay for dinner, I had to gauge whether accepting would seem suspicious. When she'd hand me a glass of water and our fingers would brush, I had to force myself not to react. One evening in early September, I got a few minutes alone with Alina in the kitchen while Marcus was taking a shower. Alina was loading the dishwasher, and I was helping by clearing the table when she spoke quietly without looking up. "This is getting harder," she said. "I know. I can't keep this up forever." I set down the plates I'd been holding and turned to face her. "Alina, what are you saying?" She finally looked at me, and I could see the exhaustion and conflict in her eyes. "I'm saying that we need to accept that this situation isn't sustainable long term. Marcus will be starting his senior year soon, which means he'll be around more. You'll be going back to school. You can't keep stealing moments and hoping no one notices. So what do we do?" Alina was quiet for a moment, and I could hear the shower running upstairs. Marcus singing off-key to some song I didn't recognize. "I don't know," she said finally. "I honestly don't know where this leads. But Jake, I need you to understand something. Don't regret any of it. Not the wasp nest, not that first dinner, not falling for you. You've given me something I didn't even know I needed." "What's that?" "You helped me remember who I am underneath all the roles I play. You made me feel seen and valued and ... alive again. Whatever happens next, I'll always be grateful for that." I moved closer to her, close enough that I could smell her familiar scent, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "I don't regret it either," I said quietly. "I know this is complicated and messy and probably impossible. But Alina, what we have is the most real thing in my life. Whatever happens, I'm grateful for this too." Alina smiled then, sad but genuine. "We're quite a pair, aren't we?" "Yeah," I said, reaching out to squeeze her hand briefly before we heard Marcus's footsteps on the stairs. "We really are." As Marcus bounded into the kitchen, still damp from his shower and asking what was for dessert, Lena and I shared a look that contained everything we couldn't say out loud. We were living in the present, taking what moments we could get and accepting that the future was uncertain. It wasn't a solution, but it was an understanding. And for now, that had to be enough. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my dorm room at State University, staring at a text message from Alina that simply says, "Saw a wasp nest outside my office today and smiled. Hope you're doing well. It's been 3 weeks since our last real conversation." But reading those words makes me feel that familiar warmth in my chest. It's the same feeling I got that first day when she looked at me like I was someone who could solve problems. Our relationship has evolved into something I never could have predicted back in June. When I returned to school in late August, Alina and I had to face the reality that whatever we had wouldn't survive the distance and the complications. Unchanged. We couldn't keep stealing moments and living in secret indefinitely. We also couldn't pretend that what we'd shared hadn't fundamentally changed both of us. So we found a middle ground. We text occasionally carefully worded messages that could be interpreted as friendly if anyone ever saw them, but that carried deeper meaning for us. Sometimes Elena will send me a photo of her garden or mention a book she's reading. I'll tell her about my classes or share a funny story from campus. Life. Every few weeks, we'll have a phone conversation when I'm walking across campus late at night. She's finished with her shift at the hospital. The physical aspect of our relationship is over. We both knew it had to be. The emotional connection remains transformed into something that feels sustainable and honest within the constraints of our situation. Alina has become what I can only describe as my closest friend, the person who knows me better than anyone else. Even though we rarely see each other anymore, she started dating again, which she told me about in one of our phone conversations. Back in October, there's a doctor at her hospital who's been asking her out for months, and she finally said yes. "I think you'd like him," she said, and there was something almost shy in her voice. "He's kind and funny, and he listens when I talk." "I'm happy for you," I said, and I meant it. The thought of Elena with someone else didn't hurt the way I'd expected it to. Instead, it felt right. She deserved to be with someone who could love her openly, who could take her on dates and introduce her to friends and build a real life with her. "Jake," she said quietly, "you know that what we had—" I know I interrupted gently. I'm grateful for it. All of it. "Marcus and I are still best friends, which is something I wasn't sure would be possible when everything started. But I've learned to compartmentalize in a way I didn't know I was capable of. When Marcus talks about his mom's new boyfriend or mentions how happy she seems lately, I can genuinely share in his happiness for her without feeling conflicted about my own role in her transformation. The guilt hasn't disappeared entirely, but it's evolved into something more manageable. I've accepted that I'll always carry the weight of that secret. But I've also accepted that some experiences are worth carrying that weight for. Marcus has no idea what happened between his mother and me, and he never will. That's a burden, Alina, and I chose to bear together, and it's one we'll continue to bear separately. But watching Marcus interact with the more confident, vibrant version of his mother, seeing him benefit from her increased happiness without ever knowing where it came from, has helped me understand that our secret served a purpose beyond just protecting ourselves. Looking back now, I can see that what Alina and I shared was never going to be a traditional relationship with a traditional resolution. It was something else entirely, a connection that existed outside normal categories, that served its purpose and then transformed into something that could coexist with the rest of our lives. What I learned from Alina goes far beyond anything I could have expected when I offered to help her with that wasp nest. She taught me what it means to really see someone, to look past the roles they play, and connect with who they are underneath. She showed me that emotional intimacy doesn't always have to lead to forever, that sometimes the most meaningful connections are the ones that help us become better versions of ourselves. Before Alina, I thought love was supposed to be simple. Meet someone. You fall for them. You build a life together. Alina taught me that human connection is far more complex and nuanced than that. She showed me that it's possible to love someone deeply, while also understanding that circumstances make a traditional relationship impossible. She taught me that accepting limitations doesn't diminish the value of what you share. Most importantly, Alina helped me understand what it means to truly listen to someone, to make them feel seen and valued for who they are, rather than who you need them to be. That lesson has changed how I interact with everyone in my life. I'm a better friend, a better son, better person, because of what she taught me about empathy and genuine connection. I've been dating a girl named Sarah from my sociology class for the past 2 months. She's smart and funny and kind, and when I tell her about my plans to switch majors, she listens with the same attention that Alina taught me to recognize as rare and valuable. When Sarah talks about her own dreams and fears, I listen the way Alina taught me to listen, not just waiting for my turn to speak, but really hearing what she's saying. Sarah doesn't know about Alina, and she probably never will. Influence is there in every conversation we have, in every moment when I choose to be present and attentive rather than distracted or dismissive. That's Elena's lasting gift to me, not just the memory of what we shared, but the understanding of how to truly connect with another person. She taught me that the people who change us most profoundly aren't always the ones we end up with. Sometimes they're the ones who appear in our lives for a specific purpose, will help us become who we're meant to be, and then step back to let us live that better version of ourselves. I still think about that day with the wasp nest sometimes. If I hadn't offered to help, if Alina hadn't invited me to stay for dinner, if we hadn't talked late into the night about feeling lost and uncertain, how different would my life be now? I might still be stumbling through college without any real sense of purpose, still believing that meaningful connections were supposed to be simple and straightforward. Instead, I understand now that relationships exist in all kinds of configurations, that love can take forms that don't fit neatly into societal expectations, and that sometimes the most transformative experiences are the ones that exist in the gray areas between friendship and romance, between right and wrong, between what is and what might have been. Alina was right about one thing. We were quite a pair. Two people who found each other at exactly the moment we both needed to be found, who helped each other remember who we were underneath all the roles we'd been playing, and who had the wisdom to let our connection evolve into something that could survive in the real world. Sometimes the people who change us most are the ones we never expected to let in. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, those people teach us not just how to love, but how to let love transform us into better versions of ourselves. Even when that love can't look the way we might have originally hoped, I wouldn't trade what Alina and I shared for anything, even knowing how it had to end. Because it didn't really end, it just became something different. Something that fits into our lives as they actually are, rather than as we might have wished they could be. And that, I've learned, is its own kind of forever.